Welcome back to FM Story. This is the first episode of the £1 billion Football Manager experiment. In this series, we're taking the weakest clubs in the country's top flight and giving them an unbelievable £1 billion to see how money changes their destiny. We're choosing the weakest club by whoever is predicted to finish bottom at the beginning of the first season. We're starting here in Scotland with Livingston. Using the in-game editor, we've made just one change. Their bank balance now sits at a staggering £1 billion. Everything else remains exactly as it was. That means they still play at the home of the Setfair Arena with a capacity of just 9,713. Their reputation is only 4,650. One of the lowest in the Premiership, and the infrastructure, training facilities, youth coaching and youth recruitment all stuck in single digits. So the question is simple. Can Livingston turn endless riches into footballing glory, or will they waste it all and remain Scotland's perennial underdogs? Let's dive in and see how Season 1 unfolds. So, Season 1's ended, and it wasn't exactly successful. It was pretty tight at the bottom, but Livingston ended up finishing 12th and were relegated on goal difference. Kilmarnock, who finished a point ahead of them, managed to stay up by virtue of winning the playoff. In the Scottish League Cup, Livingston didn't make it out of the group stages, only winning one of 4 games in the group stage and finishing behind St Johnstone by a point. And then the Scottish Cup, they had a decent run, firstly beating Inverness, and then winning 2-0 away at Dunfermline, or knocking Hibs out on penalties, and then losing 3-2 in the semi-final against Dundee, having been 2-0 up after 17 minutes, and it looks like the keeper had a bit of a stinker there. Obviously, as we said, the only thing we changed at the start of the game was the bank balance, so we didn't change any transfer budgets or wages or anything like that, and they don't appear to have done an awful lot in the first season. They've signed 11 players for a total of 75,000. They've sold, or they've got rid of 1 player and not got any money in. And even then, that player that they got that went out on loan. In terms of the players that came in, I mean, 39,000 was the most for someone in January who only then went on to start 4 games. Sangare came in on loan from Man City and didn't exactly set the world alight. Probably the best of the signings was Michael Chang, who got the second goal in that semi-final of the Scottish Cup. Came in, started 31 games, average rating of 7.07 for a 35-year-old Cuban. Was an interesting transfer. Unfortunately, not enough to keep them up. Reputation has dropped down with the relegation. No change has been made to the ground or to the facilities. And they actually have more money than at the start of the season. They've gained another 9.5 million since the beginning of the season, but they'll begin Season 2 in the Championship. So Season 1's over. Despite a bank balance of over £1 billion, Livingston finished rock bottom of the Premiership, couldn't escape the group stage of the League Cup. And while they made a spirited run to the semi-final of the Scottish Cup, it wasn't enough to salvage the season. The money is still there, untouched, waiting to be spent. The big question is, will they finally learn how to use their fortune in Season 2, or will they continue to prove that money alone can't buy success? Season 2 is now complete, and much better showing in this season from Livingston. They've won promotion back to the Premiership at the first time of asking, won the league by 11 points and comfortably went back up. The Scottish Challenge Cup, they made it to the semi-final before losing to Partick Thistle, who went on to lose the final. The group stage of the Scottish League Cup went much better than last season, seeing them pick up 4 wins in 4 games to finish comfortably top of the group. They then went on to beat Dundee after extra time in the second round. And then another extra time victory, this time over Motherwell in the quarter-final, before losing 2-0 against Rangers at Hampden in the semi-final. The Scottish Cup began with a victory against East Kilbride, followed by a narrow victory away at St Johnstone, beating Dundee United on penalties, and then defeating Partick Thistle in the quarter-final, before narrowly losing out to Rangers again at Hampden in the semi-final. Transfer-wise, lots of players in, lots of players out, but still not too much in terms of money spent. There was actually a few players came in at the very end of last season, between season 1 and season 2. Mostly on, all on free transfers. And then the most was spent was 115,000 in due on someone who didn't start a league game in Josh Robinson. A bit of a strange transfer, that one. Adam Montgomery came in and was probably the star signing. Lee Irwin came in and got 11 goals. And then in terms of outgoings, not too much made from them. And some players that went out and really didn't perform when they'd been sold. There weren't much of a great loss there. When you compare the salary per year, I mean, Livingston really should have won the league like they did. Much, much higher than anyone else in the league. Over £1 million a year more than anyone else at that kind of level. The one concern I have for them going forward is that I see them try to sign players and having to pay them a lot, and I see the wages ballooning to a point where it starts eating into that bank balance. Speaking of the bank balance, that's gone down from 1,009 million to 751 million, which suggests that either there's a increase to the capacity coming up or a new ground, or an increase to the quality of the facilities, because nothing's changed as far as the ground's concerned, and nothing's changed yet as far as the facilities are concerned. That's season 2 over and done with, back into the Premiership, and now can they make that money count? Can they survive another season in the Premiership and push on to potentially start challenging in the top half? Livingston's return to the Premiership saw them finish 8th with decent cup runs, being knocked out in the 4th round of the Scottish Cup, but making it to the quarter-final of the League Cup before they were knocked out by Rangers. The club's reputation improved to being above 5,000, and also saw improvements to the training facilities, the youth facilities, and the youth coaching. This also coincided with Livingston splashing some cash in the transfer market, including £4.5 million on Marvin Caletta. But perhaps the biggest concern has to be the raising of the wages that they're paying, going from 3.46 million per year last year in the Championship to paying 29.62 million in the Premiership, well above anyone outside of Rangers and Celtic. I mean, 21 million more than the 4th placed side in terms of wages. That obviously is going to be a big concern going forward with this, because if the wage bill keeps rising like that, they're quickly going to burn through that £1 billion that they started with. At the end of season 3, they've already gone through pretty much 300 million. The bank balance down to 709 million. Obviously, a chunk of that has gone on improving the facilities, but the wage bill banding is going to cause some serious problems going forward, I feel. Season 4, seen a bit of a jump forward on the pitch, with Livingston rising up the table to finish third, qualifying for the Europa League. Quite some distance off the top two, but 10 points clear of fourth. Was a great season. Cup competition-wise, again in the Scottish League Cup, they went out at the quarter-final stage at the hands of Rangers. And in the Scottish Cup, Rangers also knocked them out in the quarter-final stage as well. There was further improvements to the training, youth facilities, youth coaching and youth recruitment. And about another 100 million knocked off the bank balance. Again, spending quite a bit of money, spending 9.75 million, which was nearly 40% of what was spent in that division. Bringing in players who, by and large, didn't actually do an awful lot. I mean, obviously, Zane Okoro coming in January for 3.9 million, he's certainly played his part. But spending 2.3 million on Beta Fetai in February, on the 1st of February, presumably on deadline day, to only start 3 games with an average rating of 6.57 isn't the greatest. They did do quite a bit of work in free transfers, which paid off a bit better. But yet again, salary has increased massively. From 29.6 million at the end of season 3, they're now spending 44.5 million per year just on the wages. It's almost caught up with Rangers and Celtic. 2 million behind Rangers, 6 million behind Celtic, which, given the size of the clubs, obviously to attract players, they're going to have to spend more money, but they're going to end up, I would imagine soon, spending close on 100 million a year in salary, which is going to ruin that bank balance pretty quickly. Season 5 saw a bit of a backward step, certainly as far as the league's concerned. Having finished third last season and qualifying for Europe, Livingston down in 8th this season in the league. Again, in the Scottish League Cup, they made it to the quarterfinals before being knocked out by Motherwell. And the Scottish Cup, they made it to the quarterfinals before being knocked out by St Johnstone. And that, you would have to say, is probably a chance gone to really push on in that competition. As far as European football is concerned, it was elimination out of the Europa League at the first stage of asking, losing the home leg against Olympia to go out 3-2 on aggregate. They then did manage to make it into the Conference League phase, beating Lask 3-2 on aggregate. And in the league phase, they did okay. They finished 15th, won 2 of the 6 games, drew 3 of them, and lost 1. Obviously saw them into the playoff round, where a comfortable away victory against Ordubasi and followed up with a 1-0 victory at home saw them into the next round. But unfortunately, they came up against Newcastle in the last 16. They lost the home leg 2-1, managed to get a late consolation goal at the end of that game. They then did win 2-1 away from home, having gone behind very early. An 89th minute winner on the night, taking them into extra time and penalties. However, a 3-0 defeat on penalties saw them exit the competition at that last 16 stage. A decent run in Europe there for a first time of asking. Again, quite a bit of money spent, most of it though just on one player in Sotris Alexandropoulos, who came in January, only started 10 games. A lot of free transfers. Kerwin Vargas came in and played a lot. Osaka came in, Leeson, Gustavo Sarr all came in and played quite a lot of football. And yet again, the salaries have exploded, and now Livingston are paying the most money out in salary in the Scottish Premiership. They're paying more than both Celtic and Rangers. And alongside that, though, somehow the bank balance has gone back from 605 million back up to 794 million. So they've somehow made from somewhere this year 180 million into the bank balance. But an interesting season, a decent season in Europe. League-wise, they've stepped back a bit with that league finish, and now they are paying an absolute fortune, and I would imagine it'll only get more and more. Season 6 saw a bit of an improvement in the league, rebounding from finishing 8th last season to finishing 4th this season. But that doesn't really tell the full story. Really, you would expect them to finish high up the table. And the reason for that would be they're now spending 105 million per year on salary. That's almost as much as Rangers and Celtic combined. And when you look at the wages, it has really got out of control. They've somehow managed to sign this season Frankie de Jong on £400,000 per week. And then, like some of the other players that have come in, 195,000 per week. You got a couple on 120,000 per week. And then another 4 or 5 that are over 50,000 per week. For a club the size of Livingston, that is kind of incredible. In the Scottish League Cup, it was a 4th successive quarter-final exit, losing 2-1 against Celtic, having been in front in that game. And the Scottish Cup saw them make it to the semi-final, but losing to an 89th minute penalty from Lawrence Shankland, who last season was at Livingston. The reputation continues to grow. The bank balance is back down to about 606 million, which is about what it was the season before last, before that strange boost last season. And facility-wise, nothing's changed. Still the same ground with the same capacity. No change to the training facilities since we last saw an increase in them. And I suppose the big question going forward is, how high is this wage bill actually going to get? After 6 seasons, we've gone from them being 2.3 million in the first season, now 105 million spent on wages. Season 7, once again, saw Livingston finish 4th in the league. However, this season, a disappointing European campaign. They made it past Slovan Bratislava at the first time asking in the Europa League, before picking up a victory away against Ajax in the first leg of a Europa League qualifier, but then losing 2-0 at home in the second leg to see them drop into the Conference League, where in the qualifiers they lost 2-0 at home to Torino, or drawing 2-2 away in Italy, and that being the end of the European campaign for the season. Scottish League Cup knocked out on penalties in the 5th round, and the Scottish Cup again knocked out on penalties again by Aberdeen, this time in the quarter-final. For the second successive season, more than 40 million spent in wages. Alex Paulson being the biggest signing, 29-year-old New Zealand goalkeeper for 21.5 million. Decent keeper, but it seems a bit on the pricey side. 12.25 million for Cheikh Mbak Diop, which seems again overinflated. And wages-wise, not as bad, because the salary for Frankie de Jong isn't there. Of course, he's actually showing in the reserves. I mean, look at the reserve wages. Frankie de Jong, 400k a week. You've got 52k a week, 31k a week. So quite a sizable amount of players that they've signed on big money that they no longer want. But going back to the first team squad, I mean, still 5 players over £100,000 a week, and then another 6 or 7 above £50,000 a week, including players that are not playing regularly. I mean, Dimitrescu played a total of 7 games in the season, and he's on £120,000 per week. Now, his contract is about to expire, so he's probably going, which is some money off the wage bill, but I can only imagine what that total is that they're spending now. And it's gone up again, now up to 122 million. Now they are spending more than Rangers and Celtic combined, which is just astonishing. Season 8 saw another big step forward on the pitch, back up to third in the league, so within 5 points of Rangers in second and 8 points of Celtic at the top, and 21 points clear of Aberdeen in fourth. So a real big step forward taken as far as the league's concerned. In the cup competitions, it was defeat in the final of the League Cup, losing 2-0 against Rangers. The Scottish Cup saw a 2-1 defeat against Rangers, the second time in the season at Hampden. It was 1-1 when Livingston went down to 10 men, and then a penalty late on saw Rangers into the final. But perhaps the biggest shock was the European campaign. The European campaign began in the qualifying rounds of the Europa League in July. Pretty comfortable to see off Maribor in the first round that they played. Again, pretty comfortable to see off Molde in the next round. Then losing the away leg against Maccabi Tel Aviv after extra time saw them drop down from the Europa League into the Conference League. Another decent season in the league phase of the Conference League saw them finish 16th, winning 3, drawing 1, losing 2 of their 6 league phase games, which obviously saw them into the knockout playoff round, where they won away at Graza Arke, lost the home leg, but won after a mammoth penalty shootout. That then saw them take on Lask in the last 16 of Conference League, a 2-1 victory in the home leg, followed by a 2-0 victory away from home. Saw them into the quarter-final, where they played Tromsø. Decent win away from home, 3-2, followed by a relatively comfortable 3-1 victory at home. Got off to a flyer in that game. Saw them into the semi-final. But unfortunately, they ran into a decent Lazio team who won 2-0 in Livingston, and then a 1-1 draw in the away leg, despite the early goal, wasn't enough to get them into the final of the Conference League. A bit less money spent on transfers this season. 24 million. Again, the players that they bought for big money didn't exactly perform. And in fact, Andy Wright signed in January from Celtic for 4.1 million. And he made 2 appearances off the substitutes bench. Didn't get an assist, didn't get a goal. And that is just throwing money away. I mean, obviously a young player, looks like he could have potential, but that's an awful lot of money at this stage for a 19-year-old. Probably the pick of the signings was Garcia Pascual on a free transfer, 21 goals in 44 games. And the wage bill has come down from 122 million last season. It's now only 95 million. I say only 95 million. Rangers and Celtic's wage bill is going up as well, but the money that Livingston is spending isn't crazy. But there has been some developments with the club. Now, the reputation is nearly 6,000. The bank balance is 788 million. That's a big boost from where it was last season, which was 519 million at the end of season 7. Part of the reason for that is that a lot of money was spent outside of the playing staff between season 7 or during season 7. There is now a new ground, the David Fernandez Stadium, which holds 20,184. And that has obviously seen a big increase in money coming into the club, especially as well as that running the Conference League. Again, no improvements to the training facilities, but undoubtedly a new ground has seen the money rolling in there. Season 9 saw more of a step forward from Livingston on the pitch, finishing third again, this time by 1 point. But as you can see, there was a change on the last day of the season, and that gets worse for Livingston. On the last day of the league season, Livingston went to Ibrox, lost 2-0, and it cost them finishing second and a chance of Champions League football. In the domestic cup competition, another defeat to Rangers, this time in the League Cup final, in extra time. Saw them miss out on picking up that trophy, but they did pick up the first trophy of the save by winning 1-0 against Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup final. A final that saw 2 players sent off, 1 for each team, but they've managed to pick up some silverware, and it's only cost them about 500 million to do so. European football wise, better in the qualifiers, beating Lech both legs to see themselves into the league phase of the Europa League. And a decent season in the league phase, finishing 11th, a drop down on the last day of the league phase, but won half of the league games, drew 2, only lost 2. And the shame in that is probably that the 2 games that they lost in the league phase were the last 2 games of the phase. They got hammered 4-0 at home by RB Salzburg, and then went away to Leverkusen and got hammered 4-0 there as well. It meant that they went into the knockout playoff round where they were drawn against Real Sociedad, which should be a pretty tough tie on paper. They drew 1-1 away from home, drew 0-0 at home, and came out on top in the penalty shootout, which saw them drawn against Bodo Glimt in the quarter-final. 3-1 victory at home was enough that it meant that the 2-1 defeat away from home wasn't costly. Into the quarterfinals against PSV, 2-2 draw at home, but then unfortunately a 3-1 defeat away from home, and conceding 2 goals in the opening 5 minutes didn't really bode well in that competition. The wage bill, having dropped down below 100 million last season, has ballooned again, back up to 118 million. And that was with a relatively calm transfer windows, 16 million spent. They actually made a net profit, 16.5 million back in. Again, another signing for big money, this time Mascolo from Hearts. Came in at the start of the season, again a young forward who basically made 3 appearances off the bench in the league, 1 appearance off the bench in the Europa League, 4 substitute appearances, having cost 7.25 million, is just, they're spending money to sign young players who are not good enough to play at the start of the time at the club, which could be costly in terms of what they're spending. Although he's only on 5k a week, so it's not too bad. But we now have someone at the club on 475,000 a week, even more than Frankie de Jong was at the club. Rodrigo Huescas, a right back, looks a decent player, looks like he gets forward, but that's a hell of a lot of money to spend on one player at this size of a club. And following the increase in the bank balance, following the opening in the new stadium, it's dropped by 150 million in this season, down to 634 million in the bank. Still an awful lot, and they should get quite a number more seasons out of this, but if that wage bill keeps ballooning, then there could be some issues ahead. Season 10 saw Livingston pick up yet another trophy, this time the League Cup. And for once, overcoming Rangers at Hampden Park, winning 2-0. The Scottish Cup saw them eliminated at the quarter-final stage at the hands of Celtic. The league saw yet another third-place finish, although slipping further behind Rangers and Celtic. And the wage bill again increases, this time to 129 million. And they are still spending about the same as Rangers and Celtic combined on wages. And rather alarmingly, the bank balance has created from 634 million at the end of season 9 to 387 million at the end of season 10. Hopefully that's to do with an expansion of the stadium. I don't think it actually shows us that anywhere. Nope. It doesn't show any potential increase. I think it does have the ability to expand it to 30,000. And hopefully that's where the money has gone to, because otherwise that's quite an alarming drop compared with where they were just a season ago. Season 11 at the end, seen a bit of a rebound in the finances. I mean, at the end of season 9, the bank balance was 634 million. Season 10, it dropped to 387 million. Now we're at the end of season 11, it's back up at 668 million. So something weird has happened. And also the capacity's gone down. The capacity was 20,184, down to 17,760, which suggests that they are expanding the ground, which is where the money went during season 10. On the pitch, a pretty sort of similar season from the last few seasons, again finishing third. This time a bit closer than in season 10 to the top two. In terms of the domestic competitions, it was defeat in the semi-final of both of them. The League Cup losing to Celtic 2-1, and then again 2-1 in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup as well. For the second successive season, they were knocked out in the knockout playoff round of the Europa League, losing the first leg 1-0 against Utrecht, winning the home leg but going out on penalties. And the wage bill hasn't got any better. It's still 129 million, which is exactly the same as it was at the end of season 10. But, I mean, look at this. You've got still Questcast at £475,000 a week. You've got El Adadawi at 275,000. They picked up on a free transfer this season and he started 12 games. Now, he looks like he came in January because he had 15 games at Al Ittihad before that. But you've got Bakulis is over £200,000 a week. You've got Salia who's over 185,000. Now he at least, I mean, he's picked up 16 goals in 37 games. So he's repaid some of that. Gustavo Sarr is on just under 100,000. He's one of the star players. 10 goals, 12 assists in 47 games. But you've got Maget Gay, who thankfully his contract's up this season on £120,000 a week. He played in 14 games during the season. You've got Alex Paulson as a goalkeeper, who's on £94,000 a week, didn't play a single game. You've got El Shabrawi, who's on £32,500 a week and didn't play a game. They are giving people a lot of money to join them. And then within a season or two, they're out of the team and they're left to eat the contract. Season 12 was an interesting one. I think probably I have to say a bit of a disappointment given all things considered. Bank balances again dropped, this time from 668 million down to 491,000. But there has been an expansion of the ground. It is now up to 24,000 from 20,000 before the reduced capacity as they were building. However, the strangest thing is that the wage bill's gone down from 129 million to 88.5 million. So they've knocked off over 40 million in wages. They've still managed to finish third, level on point with Rangers in second, only losing out there on goal difference. But it's not had the drop in wage bill hasn't had an impact in the league. However, in the other competitions, the League Cup saw another defeat at Hampden from Rangers 4-0 in the semi-final. And the Scottish Cup saw them go out in the first round that they were playing, losing 2-1 away at Alloa after extra time. And the Europa League, a big disappointment, finishing 32nd in the league phase, winning just one of those league phase games, winning with just 5 points from the 8 games. And is this now a sign that they're starting to tighten the belt? The wage bill's gone down. Does that mean now we're going to see them start to drop off on the pitch as well? Having pondered at the end of season 12 whether the reduced wage bill was a sign of them tightening the belt and performance is about to drop on the pitch, obviously it was just one season, because they've now gone from 88.5 million, now spending 145 million a year on wages. Now, there's no one above 400,000, but you've got 2 players on £275,000 a week, one of which who only played 13 games in the season. You've got another 3 players on over £200,000 a week, one of which who played 24 games off the bench in Salia, who is now been banished to being made available for the under-19s. And then another 5 players on over £100,000 a week. I mean, that wage bill's ballooned again. On the pitch, it hasn't necessarily improved things too much in the league. I mean, third again, 2 points behind Rangers in second, 5 points behind Celtic in first. In the domestic cup competitions, they've managed to lose the League Cup final, having beaten Celtic after extra time in the semi-final. They've then lost the final 2-1 against Aberdeen. And in the Scottish Cup, they made it to the semi-final before losing 2-1 at London Park against Motherwell. But definitely a much better season in the Europa League, having finished 32nd in the league phase last season. This season, they finished 7th in the league phase, winning 5 of their 8 games in that league phase. And those 5 games, I mean, they beat AZ at home, they beat Lazio at home, they won away at CSKA Sofia, they got beaten pretty comfortably away at Sturm Graz, and drew with Brighton before nicking a win away at Feyenoord and winning at home there with a couple of early goals. And then they lost the last game of the league phase away at home to Slovan Bratislava. Obviously, it meant they skipped the knockout playoff round and went straight into the last 16, when they picked up a big 2-0 victory away from home against Fiorentina in the first leg. Followed that up with a 2-1 victory at home, see them into the last 16, where a bit of a scramble at the end of the game. They were 1-0 up against Juventus. They actually went 2-0 up, then conceded a penalty straight after the second, and then another goal quickly after that for a 2-2 draw. And you kind of think, is it really our tie to win? And then they've lost 1-0 away at home, and then they lost 1-0 at home in the second leg. But to take a team of Juventus' size so close in the quarterfinal, a big improvement on last season in the Europa League. The ground has increased capacity again. This time it's gone to its full expansion capacity of 30,365. But with that, and with that wage bill, the bank balance is now under 300 million for the first time since we gave them the £1 billion. And there's not an awful lot they can do, I don't think. I mean, they're not going to be able to expand the ground again without building a brand new one. I think it may only be a matter of time now before they run out of money, given what that wage bill looks like currently. The end of season 14 sees the bank balance having dropped even further, down to 125 million in the bank. A far cry from that billion that they started with. I mean, financially, they spent 2.5 million in transfers and made back 35 million. Most of which from selling Murad Hadu to Real Madrid. It's obviously a shame for them to lose a player that looks that good. But it was needed to balance the books slightly. There has been a slight drop in the league, dropping down to 4th. And for I think the first time in a save, someone has split Rangers and Celtic, with Aberdeen finishing 2nd. And again, finishing below Rangers on goal difference. They've had a disappointing season there. Domestic cup competition saw yet another defeat at Hampden Park against Rangers, this time a 1-0 in extra time. The Scottish Cup saw them go out at the quarter-final stage 3-2 Celtic. Tried to battle back, being 3-0 down in that game, but they didn't get close enough to take it into extra time. Europa League, not quite as good a season in the league phase as last season, ended up finishing 14th with 4 victories from the 8 games, which meant going into the knockout playoff round, where they were comfortable victories over the 2 legs against Olympiacos. But then in the last 16, unfortunately losing 1-0 against Ajax in the first leg, saw them go out 2-1 on aggregate. Season 15 sees things on a bit of a knife edge now, down to just 19 million left at the end of season 15 in the bank. They've had 15 seasons. They've basically gone through £1 billion. I'm surprised actually it's lasted as long, given what the wage budget was. However, there is some hope that there might be another couple of seasons. Livingston finished 2nd in the league, which qualifies them for the Champions League. If they can make it into the league phase of the Champions League, then they could make some big cash, and potentially we could be back for another couple of seasons rather than what on paper looks like a guaranteed final season. The Europa League saw yet another last 16 exit, this time to Eintracht Frankfurt, getting hammered 3-0 in the away leg. Didn't really do an awful lot. And then they couldn't turn that around in the home leg. Domestic cup competitions, and yet another defeat at Hampden against Rangers, this time 2-1 after extra time in that semi-final of the League Cup. And the Scottish Cup saw a 5th round exit at home to Hearts. The wage budget is on its way down, but I think it may be too little too late. At the end of season 13, they were spending 145 million a year. At the end of season 14, they were spending 133 million a year. And at the end of this season 15, they're spending 112 million a year, with only 19 million in the bank balance, unless something ridiculous happens in season 16. Season 16's undoubtedly going to be where the money runs out. And season 16 has finally seen the money run out, now down to minus 50 million in the bank. Minus 9 million transfer budget. And that is the end of the experiment. But in season 16, the league was possibly the most competitive it's been. I mean, 4 teams on 75 or more points. Celtic, who've been pretty strong throughout the whole of the season, finishing 4th. Rangers winning the title from Aberdeen, with Livingston in 3rd. Unfortunately, things didn't go to plan in the Champions League. They did knock off Olympiacos in their first qualifying round, but then a 2-0 defeat away from home against Porto was too much to turn around, and they got knocked out of the Champions League qualifiers. Obviously, that dropped them down to the Europa League. They've missed out on the top 8 by 1 place, finishing 9th, with only losing 1 game, 4 wins, 3 draws in their 8 games. Then only missing out on goal difference as well, from Malmo, who finished in that top 8. That meant they went down into the knockout playoff round, where they just about survived Elche, having lost the first leg 3-1, winning the second leg 3-0, see them through to the last 16. And the last 16 is where the journey ended for them in Europe this season, losing 4-1 on aggregate to Sporting. The domestic cup competitions were probably the worst since just about the start of the save. Whether that had anything to do with the money or not is debatable, but losing in the second round of the Scottish League Cup to Hearts 2-1, and they lost 2-1 away to Ross County in the quarter-final of the Scottish Cup. And that wraps up our first £1 billion football manager experiment with Livingston. We've seen what happens when a struggling club gets more money than they could ever dream of, but does cash really guarantee success? Across 16 seasons, Livingston never won the Premiership, but built a new stadium, upgraded facilities, and claimed 1 Scottish Cup, 1 League Cup, and a Championship title. European runs brought excitement, yet the story was defined by a runaway wage budget and financial chaos that overshadowed their progress. Next time we'll move on to another country's underdog and see if they can spend their way to glory. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this wild football journey. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.